Hello, fellow freedom fans. David Alan Carmichael. We're about to get back to my preservative talk radio, and I've got to make some adjustments to my files here. So we're going to have a presentation going here where we engage the issues. You know how it works: constitutional basis, biblical basis, basis of right versus wrong. So Tennessee Constitution has some marvelous statements about what the people's right to vote and how they're going to be weighing in on their voice to make things happen and to put people in power for their delegates. However, when you read the state statute, how to implement it, it completely contradicts the Tennessee Bill of Rights. So let's talk about that on Preservative Talk Radio. Fellow freedom fans, Preservative Talk Radio, David Alan Carmichael. We're going to be talking about today the Tennessee Constitution. I started a few days ago, or a few weeks ago. I talked about the Bill of Rights in Tennessee. So I went through 1, 2, and 3. The first couple of them really had some profound statements about freedom of religion and the protections that are there for the people of Tennessee. Now I'm going to continue on, and it's going to be something where it exposes something that you're already familiar with, but that you're maybe, I think, a vast majority of people, 99.99999.9% of the populace, just overlook the obvious, glaring, undermining of your liberty. It's that there is a chain on every person, just about every person in the United States of America, including Tennessee. Now, I haven't said this in a long time, but I want to make a statement here. Our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. Our freedom comes in proportion to our faith. And we're going to see how that's working out here. It's kind of a cliffhanger. You're going to have to hear the context of what we're doing here today, and then we'll see it. So for my video audience, you've got an outline that you see on the screen, and my radio audience, you're going to get the context. I'm actually talking to my radio audience, and I just so happen to have an outline that shows up on my screen in front of me so I can track it. And there happens to be a camera going at the same time, so you can visit me on YouTube and see this presentation if you would like to read my lips while I'm talking here. So what it is, it's Preservative Talk Radio, and the topic is Tennessee Constitution, and I call it Voting Right Removed. And so now we're was supposed to be able to click a down button here, and then everything moved on fine there. So let me see what we got here. Yeah, that's working. Okay, here we go. So let's go to Tennessee Constitution, and we're gonna go to Section 4. And in Section 4, it says that no political or religious test other than an oath to support the United States Constitution of the United States and of this state, that's the state of Tennessee, shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the state. So we're gonna pull this apart. Let's look at it. So no political test, they say, no political test shall be put to you. You don't have to say whether you're a Whig or a Tory or a Democrat or Republican or anything like that. You do not have to declare your political affiliation in order to vote in Tennessee. Also, there's no religious test. You're not required to be Amish or Baptist or Catholic or Buddhist or Muslim. You don't, or Jewish or whatever your flavor is. No requirement. In fact, you're not required to be an atheist. You're not required to be agnostic. There is no test. So they say in the Constitution. Is it possible that there's both a political and religious test that's imposed by the statute? And that's what we're going to address today. So again, It says no political or religious test other than oath to support the Constitution of the United States and of this state. So you don't have to say you're going to obey the president. You are going to uphold the Constitution. If you are not intending to uphold the Constitution, if your let's say your duty is not to uphold the Tennessee Constitution and the United States Constitution, you know what? You shouldn't be voting. If you're voting, if you've signed a statement and you've registered to vote, you're on the hook to uphold the Constitution, both of the state and the United States, with which the people and the state of Tennessee is in covenant. So these things so those are the only qualifications. So the political religious test shall never be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under this state. So that's to serve. So you don't have to abandon your religion to serve, and you don't have to take on a religion to serve. The election shall be free and equal. That's what it says in the Constitution. It shall be free and equal. So you don't have to pay a tax, and everybody should be able to vote. And it says the election shall be free and equal, and the right of suffrage, that's voting, and as hereinafter declared, shall never be denied to any person entitled thereto, except. So you can lose the right and duty to vote, the liberty and the duty to vote. You can lose it. So it shall not be denied to any person. At least it says that in the Constitution. We'll see what the statute says. Except upon a conviction, not an accusation, but a conviction by a jury, not by a judge, by a jury of some infamous crime, previously ascertained, declared by law, and judgment thereon by court of competent jurisdiction. So you've got to be accused and proven by a jury that you committed an infamous crime. So we're going to look at what infamous crimes are in Tennessee to find out what it was, what kind of heinous thing you'd have to do to not be able to vote. And so, of course, the court has to stamp the approval of the jury. So you actually have to have two or more witnesses. One, the witness of the people by means of a jury representing the people, and by means of the state represented by the judge. Those two or more witnesses will have to agree that you've committed some heinous crime, and then you would be excluded from voting. So I'm going to go to the Tennessee Code, and we're going to read it. So this is Tennessee Code, Title II, Elections, Chapter 1, General Provisions and Purpose. So the Constitution says that you cannot be banned from voting. It says that it's basically elections are free to everyone. And as long as you've got so for public office, as long as you've got an oath to the Constitution and to the state constitution, U.S. Constitution, and again, that as a voter, that it should be absolutely free and equal. If you're one of the people, you're not excluded from society or bound by anything. You should be able to vote. So says the Constitution. Let's see what it is in practice. The purpose of this title is to regulate the conduct of all elections by the people. So the people are doing it, but the state is regulating it. Now let's just admit, biblically, constitutional basis, biblical basis, the basis of right versus wrong. If the state tries to regulate the right and duty to vote in such a way that you're excluded, contrary to the Constitution, their exclusion is unconstitutional. In time, let's look over what ramifications there are for those who would impose or impede you in your exercise of your liberties and duties. Let's keep reading. It says, the statute says, the freedom and purity of the ballot are secured. Are they? That is such a big thing in the news today. How are they secured? Is some advanced intelligence computer programming sending votes into the computer that have nothing to do with the people? There's an important question for the people to be considering. So the freedom and the purity of the ballot are secured, intended to be. A freedom and purity of the ballot. So I think at this point, Well, that's what the statute said. It's declaring it to be so. Let's see if they can actually pull that off. Voters, now, watch this. Voters are required. Now there's requirements. Voters are required to vote in the election precincts in which they reside, except as otherwise expressly permitted. So they're regulating it. So you've got to be able to set up this regulation. It's a right that's regulated. So actually, this is a privilege. When you see it's a right that in civil law we begin to call a privilege. And a privilege is essentially a regulated right. It's not a wrong. It's not something which you must have a license. A license would be giving you permission to do something that which is otherwise unlawful. And that context is important for other subjects that we're going to be going over in due time. But voters are required to vote in election precincts in which they reside. So this is a privilege. In other words, it's a controlled. You're taking a right, a liberty, a duty, and they're regulating only in such a way that it's orderly and it works to the good for all your neighbors. So they're going to have you vote in the precinct that you live. And obviously there's benefits to that. You're putting in power a representative. And the representative in our societal construct is somebody who is a representative of the people in your vicinage. I'm going to use the language of Thomas Jefferson. The people in your vicinage, your vicinity. So that's it. You're going to be separated in a vicinity. So that seems like a reasonable regulation to, for the ends of fulfilling the liberty and the duty for voting and elections. Internal improvement is promoted by providing a comprehensive and uniform procedure for elections. So this is a statute that says this is the legitimate interest of government. It's basically to promote a comprehensive and uniform procedure. Well, that's good. I think that's responsible. It's up to the people of the election board and those carrying out the duties of the election structure to make sure this happens. Maximum, now this, let's see. This sounds really good, but we're going to see what another statute does to this. Maximum participation by whom? Maximum participation by all citizens in the electoral process is encouraged. In fact, if you look at the Constitution of Tennessee, it's not just encouraged, it's necessary. Maximum participation is free to happen. It's supposed to be free to happen. Well, we're gonna encourage all to participate. All, really? Is that really who they encourage? Because there is a political and religious faction in Tennessee that are excluded from voting. We don't want people like you. And we'll see who they are. So let's go to the next thing. Voter registration, registration by election commissions, and specifically qualified voters. So we're going to find out who is a qualified voter. The other thing we're going to find out is we're going to talk about who it is that is unqualified, technically. The Constitution already said who's unqualified, and it's somebody who's done something really bad. So we're going to come back and look at what that really bad is, and we're going to see how it's defined. But right here, we're going to read who is a qualified voter. A citizen of the United States, 18 years of age or older, who is a resident of the state is qualified voter unless the citizen is disqualified under the provisions of this title, that would be the statute, or under a judgment of infamy pursuant to 40-20-112. So just to get our listener back up to date, the Tennessee Constitution, Section 4 and 5, talked about that somebody serving as an officer of Tennessee, representing you, serving you, a minister for your good, they can't be excluded from service because of their political persuasion or religious persuasion. There is no bar whatsoever, and there's no requirement whatsoever. And then it goes on to talk about who can vote. Pretty much, it's open to everybody. Now, what they've done here in this statute is made it, well, they've qualified what everybody is. And so in our culture, There's a date of responsibility. In some cultures, that might be, let's say, when you get a bar mitzvah. You're 13 or whatever, in catechism, whatever it is. You go through a stage in life where you're now, considered to be responsible for your behavior. Maybe a certain society might have a younger age than 18. Maybe some societies have an older. But in America, it just pretty much is across the country recognized that somebody is now accountable for what they do and they've got enough wit about them to make a decent decision. They're no longer an infant. They're no longer an infant, and their responsibilities kicked in. So let's make sure they have some rights as well as duties when they turn 18. So we're going to come back with Preservative Talk Radio and talking about voter registration, and really, is the Constitution protecting everybody in their right to vote? So now we're going to go, we've got about 2 minutes to set up. I'm going to be going down here, scrolling down, and see this judgment of infamy. What I'd like you to do, it's educational. Preservative Talk Radio is educational. It's intended to be. Again, we're going to be talking about things on a constitutional basis, a biblical basis, and the basis of right versus wrong. That's what we're going to do. And so that's going to be very educational. Hopefully it's stimulating to your mind, but also to your soul and your spirit. So please please subscribe, and help me and share this, especially a portion. If there's a certain portion here that you really think is great, please share it with somebody, okay? So that would be really good. And so I'm going to look at my my audio program here, and we're going to see when we're going to be kicking back in. So we've got a whole minute now to wait until my music kicks in to get back into the radio broadcast. So that's it. So on the video, I think I coughed right when the music kicked in. However, with the audio for the radio recording, the music's on one track, my voice is on another, so I can go back in and I can delete all that stuff, all the coughing and stuff like that. So we've got about another 25 seconds till the music kicks in, so I'm going to set up and be ready for it. Fellow Freedom fans, David Alan Carmichael, Preservative Talk Radio. Back here, we're talking about voting. It's some would think this is kind of dry, but it's actually supposed to be extremely exciting, because I started several weeks ago going into the Tennessee Constitution, and I promised we would come back to it. And there was this one subject I just wanted to avoid for a while, and it's the one we're doing today. So you're going to get educated. Remember, this is on a constitutional basis, a biblical basis, and the basis of right versus wrong. So we have to go to the Constitution. We're going to see some right, some wrong. We're going to have to be able to discern it. What is the difference between the promises of the Bill of Rights in the Tennessee Constitution? Always keeping the United States Constitution in the back of our head, because Tennessee and the people of Tennessee are in covenant with the United States and the people of the United States to have some orderly government in the federal structure and the federalism structure. Looking at the Tennessee Constitution, we're going to talk about voting and elections. And there are promises in the Tennessee Constitution that are undermined, in my opinion. So you got a spoiler. I think it's undermined by the statutes. So far, the statutes kind of make sense. A 17-year-old might complain that they're not able to vote. If they're able to, by permission from their parents, since they're under 18, they're able to go off and go to war. How come they're not able to vote? Maybe you could make an exception for 17-year-olds who are serving in some capacity like that. But that's up to the people of Tennessee to figure out. So currently the statute for qualified voter 2-2-102, qualified voter, a citizen of the United States 18 years of age or older who is a resident of the state. That's good. So Alabamans should not be voting in Tennessee elections, especially if they're voting for the U.S. president in both states. That's too many votes. So you got to be a resident of the state and is a qualified voter unless the citizen is disqualified under the provisions of this title under a judgment of infamy pursuant to. Now, I'm going to read this section. There's a code here, 40-20-112. I'm going to back up because originally in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, elections shall be free and equal. The right of suffrage shall never be denied to any person entitled thereto unless you have a political persuasion. No, that's not what the Constitution says. Constitution hints in Section 4, at least, pretty much declares it's no political or religious test other than an oath to support the Constitution of the United States and this state shall ever be required as qualification in any office or public trust under the state. I think voting's a public trust. And then these elections shall never be denied to any person entitled thereto. And this is what I'm telling you. If you see the statute, we're going to get into it, you're going to find that there's a certain political persuasion and religious persuasion that is currently being excluded in Tennessee. And it's being done by statutes. I think was a little while ago, you heard the talk on, I was discussing an Alabama, scheme that was telling people that they had to mutilate themselves in order to get a driver's license. And they came up with that with the public, whatever the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles people came up with a policy. That wasn't law. That wasn't a statute. It's not in the Constitution. It was their own little undermining of reality, and doing a strange innovation, a dangerous innovation without parental supervision of the legislature. Well, here we're going to see that the legislature has been undermining the Constitution without the parental supervision of the Constitution. So these elections are supposed to be free and equal unless, so here it says, except upon a conviction by a jury of some infamous crime. So this statute we just mentioned, 2-2-40 or 40, we'll read it again. The statute is referring to this. It is an infamous crime. We're going to see what the definition of an infamous crime is that would exclude you from voting. So it says you can, as long as you're 18 years old, you can be a voter, as long as you're a citizen resident in the state, unless you're under a judgment of infamy pursuant to 40-20-112. So let's see what that is. What is it? What is the infamy that would disqualify you? I have some friends. I and some friends find ourselves disqualified from voting because of a religious test and a political test, an affiliation and association activity test, political affiliation, belief, activity, association, political tests, we've been excluded from voting. And religious tests, we've been excluded from voting. So that which we bow our knee to, our God, disqualifies us from voting in Tennessee. And pretty much around the country, except for a few states that people have taken the issue on and prevailed, particularly Nevada, of all places. So here's the crime of infamy that would get you kicked out of voting. I and my associates wonder if have committed a felony. We've had a judgment of infamy without a jury, without a judge, without the people's assent, and not without the state's assent represented by the judge stamping a writ that excludes us from this societal liberty and duty. Here's the judgment of infamy. Upon a conviction for any felony, it shall be the judgment of the court that the defendant be infamous. So if you have, be careful, my friends, should they say to you, if you'll just agree to this charge, whether you feel like you're guilty or not, if you'll just plead guilty, then we'll make sure we don't send you away for 10 years. Okay, if you plead guilty to a felony, you know what the judge has to do? It shall be the judgment of the court that the defendant be infamous and be immediately disqualified from exercising the right of suffrage. So be ye careful, Mr. Flynn, when somebody offers you an opportunity to disqualify yourself from many rights and duties of a citizen. No person so convicted shall be disqualified to testify in any action, civil or criminal, by reason of having been convicted of any felony, because they want you to be able to testify against yourself and against others. You know, they have that liberty and duty they'd like you to keep on your shoulders. And the fact of conviction for any felony may only be used as a reflection upon the person's credibility as a witness. So that's a little twist on court procedure, that if you get accused of another crime, they're not supposed to use the previous judgment of felony, the previous confession of the felony, whether it was a felony or not. You agreed to it to become a felony. They're not allowed to use that as a character with the next accusation. But if you're testifying against somebody else's character and conduct, then they can bring up this felony status. So that's infamy. So judgment of infamy is essentially a felony conviction. That's what's going on in Tennessee. That's what's supposed to be, which disqualifies you as a voter. So that's for the people. If something to consider is that what is your legislature doing to make things felonies? What should be a felony? A violent assault for sure should be a felony. Rape should be a felony. Murder should be a felony. There's some things that are wrong in nature. Sexual assault should be a felony. Now, some would put that as a misdemeanor because of whatever the circumstance was. What the accusation is, what the evidence was. It wasn't what the person thought was happening. There's a lot of weird details in there. But obviously, crimes against children. So aggravated assault of any type I would think would be a felony. But that's mala in se. That means it's wrong. It's bad. Mala. Mala is bad. You speak Spanish. You understand that. Mala is bad. And mala in se means in fact, in nature, in itself. It's evil. It's wrong. It's great sin. So something like that. But when the legislature starts making things felonies, so okay, some states have 3 strikes you're out stuff. Well, what if you've got something where the government has said you've got to do the following thing, or you can't, use your automobile, mow your lawn, you can't visit your children, you can't, whatever it is, they say you can't do the following thing. And if you do the following thing, it's a misdemeanor, and you do it 3 times, you're now a felon. You're now infamous. Well, what if that weird structure is something you have to do every day? And under U.S. law, Tennessee law, if there's an unconstitutional requirement, you are voluntarily yielding it if you don't do what you believe you have a natural, absolute right to do. You are voluntarily waiving it. So there's some things that you have to keep exercising the right, or you're neglecting it, you're abandoning it. So what if you're exercising that right every day? They've called it a misdemeanor, and you did it 3 days in a row, suddenly you're a felon. So you've got to be very careful. You've got to be diligent to make sure that there's not these weird little administrative faux pas that they're turning into becoming infamous. So I would say in my life, if you have some standard like that where they make up arbitrary rules that you can't fulfill, I don't know. There's probably a whole bunch of us that are infamous if they were holding us to that standard. So be very careful. So let's read here. Voter registration, registration by election commissions, and persons entitled to register. So think of this. If you're not entitled to register, if you can't fulfill the requirements of registration, then you can't vote. So this all persons being able to vote and being encouraged to vote, unless you're infamous, it may not be true. So if you have to give a political confession in order to register, not one that as long as you're upholding the Constitution, you commit to that, you associate with that duty. But some other thing, some other political persuasion, some political preference, if they put a political preference as a standard of registering, or a religious preference as a standard of registering, what a statute will do, a registration statute, will completely undermine the Constitution of Tennessee. Let's see what it says. The following persons may register permanently under this title. They might want to say permanently until death, or I guess permanently, does that presume it goes away if you die? You might even say, I would say that, there's some natural rights. Maybe you could have a statute if somebody loses their mind, they become demented. They're classified as in dementia, so that their child doesn't vote on their behalf in a way that they wouldn't have done if they were in their right mind. So I think there's some things that are, but in the Constitution, if it says all persons, then I guess if you've got a trustee, make sure you put in your trust, only vote this, right? Here's the qualifications for my vote. And, put whatever those requirements are. So if somebody has to become your trustee, maybe that's something you could do to make sure some shenanigan doesn't happen behind your back. So a person who is qualified voter when such person applies to register. The following persons may register permanently under this title. It's 1, a person who is a qualified voter when such person applies to register. Okay? So you can register to vote, but we're going to come back and we're going to find out if there is a threshold that has nothing to do with your citizenship, with your residence, with your right as a human, as a man or woman, to voice your intelligent thoughts into a vote. We'll be right back. Preservative Talk Radio, 96.9 FM. So now I got 2 more minutes. We're going to come back. It's going to be broadcasting on 96.9 FM. I go over here just to make sure I do it right. 96.9 FM, 97.9 FM. Ooh. We're going to get language skills here. Ottawa. And then 107.5 Northwest Georgia. Again, subscribe. If there's a particular part of this video that you find pleasing, you can, via YouTube or whatever, copy it, send it to your friends, suggest it, share it. Try to help me get this out here. My daughter Abby overhauled my whole bookshelf and everything, rearranged my studio, and we've got new lights. We're testing them out to try to see how the shadows can get chased and things like that. So we're trying to make some good efforts. Obviously, you do a lot of research before we go into this. A lot of stuff, a lot of reading, things like that. So I'm going to check to see how we're progressing on my audio here. So we'll see how much time we have until we're going to be. Okay, we got about 20 seconds until my music bed kicks in. And the music is a generic blues that I found on a MIDI file, and I used Cakewalk to modify it to sound like a real instruments. I put in a bass line, so you hear the roving bass in the background. That was me and my mouse clicking in notes. And then the harmonica is actually me playing along with the music with my harmonica. That's a little reality there. So it's for the most part original. So we'll be right back with our broadcast in a few seconds. Fellow Freedom fans, here I am, David Alan Carmichael, my preservative talk radio on the Nooga Radio Network, 96.9 FM Chattanooga, 99.7 FM Ottawa, and 107.5 FM Northwest Georgia. Welcome, tune in, share these stations with your friends, by the way. And of course, you can program your radio so depending on where you are as you're transitioning. Now, these things overlap each other a little bit, but as you're transitioning from one area to the other, put it on your button and just go from one to another. Encourage your friends to tune in. Again, Preservative Talk Radio, we're going to be educational. It's on a constitutional basis, biblical basis, the basis right versus wrong. You can see me on YouTube. Just type in my name, David Alan Carmichael, that's Alan, and see what you come up with in various video. And also you're going to find some U.S. court cases, Carmichael versus United States, Carmichael versus Pompeo, very shortly. In fact, I think sometime in the next 3 days, hypothetically, you might see a Carmichael versus Blinken happening. So that's for your entertainment. Now let's go to the Tennessee voter stuff. Voter registration. A person's entitled to register. A person who is a qualified voter when such person applies to register. That's somebody who can register permanently as somebody who is qualified to vote. And you go to register. You'll be registered permanently. This two. What's the next person who can vote? A person residing in an area within the state which has been ceded to the federal government if the person is otherwise qualified to vote. Now, I don't know the stipulations of the Tennessee Valley Authority. You know, there's some things that are exclusive jurisdiction that have been ceded exclusive jurisdiction to the United States, according to the U.S. Constitution, but there's people there. They're not able to vote in D.C. It's exclusive jurisdiction of the United States, so you're going to go only to a United States District Court for your little issues. But as far as a citizen of the vote of your vicinage, it's within the borders of Tennessee. So you'll be able to vote in Tennessee. A person who will be 18 years of age on or before the date of the next election after the person applies to register and who is otherwise able to register. So if you're 17 and you're going to turn 18 before the election day, you can register now. You don't have to wait till you become 18. Just show whatever proofs you have of your age, and you can register now. I wonder how many people know that. Then the statute goes on to say, this is the registration form statute. So we've talked about who can permanently register. It should be anybody. But so that statute wasn't too bad. What was that statute? That was 2-2-104, persons entitled to register. So you got to register to vote. You know, you can vote. You just have to register. And then, so they're keeping track of who voted. They have to keep track. So registration is a good thing. But now let's see if there's something silly. What about the form? So far, so good. So far, the Constitution wants all to participate. It's not going to be denied to anybody who's eligible until you get to the form. And what they do on the form is they have a political test and a religious test. We'll see how it plays out. The permanent registration record shall be substantially as follows. Substantially. Now in some people, the way you look at the word substantially, you know, we might think about mostly as follows, or more than half as follows, or 5, or it could be 3 out of 10. What is substantially? What is the meaning of the word substantially? I got to go look that up in Tennessee statute, see if it's defined. But in law, it turns out that substance is what they mean by substantially. So the word substance, the registration record shall be, the substance shall be. Does that mean 100%? No exceptions? Here's the question. It should be mostly? It should be no exceptions. What's the definition of substantially? Because it could have been written as the substance of the registration record shall be. It says it shall contain, here's where it says it, all the information required before being signed by the registrant. all of the information. So if there's anything here that's not there, that means you're excluded from registration, notwithstanding your eligibility to vote. So should be substantially as follows: shall contain all the information required before being signed by the registrant, and shall be witnessed as indicated on the form. So here's the permanent registration record: last name, first name, middle name. What if you don't have a middle name? Or sex. Here you go. See, now people are going to freak out of this. Well, I say my sex is a boy and I'm a girl, and vice versa. You know, XXs will say they're male and XYs will say they're girls. In the pandemic of dementia, that's something we face. Should they be excluded from voting? Odds are they're not going to be. However, there's somebody that is because of their political and or religious affiliation and dedication. You should have your legal residence, number, street, or road, apartment. So legal residence, does that mean you actually, abide there? You actually in domicile there? Or is you own 2 properties, or you're leasing 2 or 3 properties, and you might live in one, but your name is on the utility information, the utility bills that go to the other location. Is that your legal residence? It's legal? I don't know. Question, different discussion, different day, but it's something to think about. You should have on the registration form your city and county. Mailing address if different from the legal address. Now that's interesting, because I know I'm in a situation where I have property one place and then it's with my name on it and getting bills there because I'm a trustee. So I've got my name showing up on stuff on a piece of property, but where I'm living physically every day is in a different property. And that's where the mailing address goes. So with regard to my trustee duties, stuff goes to where I live every day. So those are the kind of things you have to think about. Now, what's this? Social security number, comma, if any. So if you've successfully evaded enumeration at birth, or even after enumeration at birth, you've looked up David Alan Carmichael's enumeration at birth discussion, and you found out there's a procedure to get unenumerated at birth. Unless you've done that, there's this if any. Well, what do you mean if any? Social security number. So there's a problem where people are presuming that everybody's got a number. And if there was an enumeration at birth and it wasn't your fault, and the administration refuses to suppress their record that was done behind your back, well, now somebody is saying, I don't care that you've got XY chromosome. You're not allowed to not identify with this number, which has a bunch of other implications that you can imagine in your own life. So I don't care what your XX chromosome or your XY chromosome. This social security number was assigned to you at birth. It was what is assigned. Listen to this language. Assigned to you at birth. For whatever reason, it has more power than your identity that comes from nature. Something is subliminally wrong here. But look what's showing up on the voter registration. We'll go through the rest, and I'm going to come back and talk about the significance of this as regard to a religious and or political affiliation test. So it also says date and place of birth. So that tells you whether you're the law of the land, what your citizenship is. Obviously, it doesn't have your parents there, so it can't talk about the law of blood, the common law standards for citizenship, and I believe that in the organic sense, not as a fake, faux, privileged citizen, but actually somebody as a right. Are you a citizen of the United States? Now, some people are freaked out about that. How do you know? How many people know that? That's a legal conclusion. So we'll talk about that at a different time, but that's an important thing. And I'm going to actually dispel some rumors. Half of the rumors are right, but it's only a half truth. So there's non-truth in it. And I'm going to have to do a show just on the context of citizenship as it relates to the U.S. Constitution. We'll do that at a different time. Where were you last registered to vote? City, county, state. Make sure you're not doing it on all other places, and they can track that. Are you resident of the state of Tennessee? That's important. Have you ever been convicted of a crime which is a felony of the state? Yes or no? So, by the way, if you lie on that, you can actually get penalized for giving a false answer. If the answer to question 10 is yes, what's the crime or crimes? If the answer to the question is yes, you have received a pardon, and of your rights of citizenship being restored by court for all crimes listed, and then you swear an oath. And remember what the Bible says. It says, don't give an oath. And it tells why. This is Old Testament. It says, don't give an oath. And explains it. Because then, since oaths are voluntary, it will be sin for you if you do not fulfill it. So the command in the Old Testament is don't give an oath. And then it says, oh, by the way, when you give an oath, because I know you're going to do it, you're only going to do it, and I'm going to give you some brutal Hebrew here, and I'm not going to say the name of the Lord in vain. It has power. I'm going to say it. The scripture says, do it Hashem Yehovah. Be Hashem, or it might be Beshem Yehovah, in the name of the one who was, who is, and is to come. So that's, the Bible tells you, don't give an oath because it's voluntary. When you volunteer, it'll be sin for you if you don't fulfill it. And then, oh, by the way, so if you're going to do this thing that'll be sin for you if you don't fulfill it, do it in my name. That's a biblical basis. So we're going to finish off the constitutional basis. We're going to go back here to and I'm going to get rid of this outline for my own eyes. So with regard to voting, they put this requirement on the form that you identify with a social security number, if any. Now, you would think it's like, oh, wait a minute. You can't assign that to me at birth. I can object to this. I'm a free person. This is a free country. So there's only so much you can do to stop me from voting. But what they're doing right now is they're voting. Now, I said this was a political affiliation and a religious affiliation and/or. So there are people who have religious convictions about Social Security. I know them. I talked to some of them yesterday. I went to a law school, Juris Doctorate, a Juris Doctor friend of mine now has passed law school unnumbered. Somebody, because of their religious convictions, can't identify with a Social Security number. You don't know what kind of hurdles they go through. They're going through hurdles to communicate to the American Bar Association or their state's bar association. And of course, they've got some religious, let's say, accommodations through the United States courts for different things where the United States demands identification with Social Security number, passport, stuff. They've been through that and they've solved those problems. They still have to come up with the American Bar Association or the Florida Bar Association, particular state, that says you can't have a professional license without giving a Social Security number, if any, based on Title 42 of the United States Code, Section 666, of all things. So there's people who, because of religion and the very fact that this thing's, being ordered about all the states under Section 666, that raises some particular religious, warning signs for people. And they can't in good conscience identify with a silly thing to vote. So you see there's a religious test regarding this that's been installed on the form, not in the statute, other statutes about eligibility, but the form trips up the Constitution. And then, of course, also there's a political thing. It is socialism. It's a socialist number. It's a socialist dependency. They may have political reasons for not wanting to be a socialist. And even though that somebody has assigned that to them behind their back. That's the controversy. Thank you for listening, Preservative Talk Radio. And we're going to be back with our Preservative Talk Radio, engaging the issues of the day on a constitutional basis, biblical basis, the basis of right versus wrong. And let's love our neighbor as ourselves. Let's honor God and honor the King and love our neighbor as ourselves. And that's it. And stay tuned to Nuga Radio Network. Thank you for tuning in. Again, share. If you have questions, send the questions on the YouTube comments. I'd love it. Give me a thumbs up. And what we're going to do is I'm going to save this. And so that's it. So I appreciate the time you've spent listening to this Preservative Talk Radio video. Thank you. God bless you.